There to know about drugs and brain damage. They have advertisements with a pen and an egg going in there and it's frying your brain. Every time you do it, you knock some brain cells out. And
well, the president's consort urges us to simply say no, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Tim Leary the other night was wearing a T-shirt which said "Just Say No," K-N-O-W. See how close to the surface it is and how nearly the same thing? So that's the short and obvious answer. What is there to know about drugs? A huge amount. I mean, this is a department of human knowledge called pharmacology that is the life study of many people. In terms of this question of psychedelics and being a spiritual adventurer and coming to a place in your life where you say, then you have to make very clear choices. My own approach to this has been to give great force to tradition. That's why we're here talking about shamanically utilized plants, because they are plants with a history of human usage, thousands of years old. We already know that they do not cause tumors or madness or miscarriages, because if that were the case, they would have been pushed aside over millennia of usage. A private prejudice of my own that I urge on people is that the drugs they take should be as much like brain chemistry as possible, as non-invasive of the physical brain as possible. Fortunately and suggestively, the strongest of all hallucinogens are the ones most like ordinary brain chemistry. Another thing I think that's important is to be sort of pharmacologically monomaniacal. It's good to do, when you find out what works for you, just really do it into the ground rather than being someone who is always, this week it's 2CB and next week it's something else and then something else. It's much better, I think, if you find an ally who resonates with you to then utilize that. Ralph, you deal with all this. What do you...
A couple of things I would just say to that question. One is the first thing we all have to learn to do. I mean, we do it, but we also fall into the habit. Our national culture has this concept of drug, D-R-U-G, the ad that you mentioned, and Nancy Reagan's slogan refer to drugs. And drugs is a very global category, as anyone knows, as soon as you start to think about it. And law enforcement legislation does not presently, make any distinction between heroin, cocaine, marijuana, LSD, which couldn't be more different. They have completely opposite, sometimes, effects on the brain and nervous system. So that's one thing. Be discriminating about what drug you're talking about. And then the other thing is to be aware of the fact that science and scientific information is a controlled process. And it's controlled by a government that has a basically fascist attitude towards foods and drugs. I've often thought the FDA could be an acronym for Fascist Drug Administration. We do have a fascist system within a larger outwardly democratic process. One of the things that's interesting to realize is that if you have a democracy, you can elect yourself into a fascism, which is what we've done.
Yes,
because fascism is the imposition of the opinions and beliefs of a minority on the majority.
It's the great danger of democracy, that it will become some kind of fascism of the majority.
And so the science the fascist science, the medical pharmaceutical complex, which is next to the military-industrial complex, the largest and most powerful power group in our world, controls what goes out into the media in terms of scientific information. Not only control it, they manipulate it. It becomes more a matter of propaganda. So when you read accounts in newspapers and magazines that say such and such a scientist did a study that proved that MDMA lowers serotonin levels, whatever, and therefore damages brain cells, you can't read that and accept it as truth. You have to inform yourself, I would say, become more maniacal about pharmacology in a different sense than Terence. You have to train yourself and read the technical literature. If you really want to know what really goes on, you have to go into the original technical literature yourself, and you have to be able to discriminate between scientific experiments that are done for propaganda purposes and those which are genuine. And the media do not make that distinction, and drug enforcement doesn't make it, legislation doesn't make it. So, it's everyone's responsibility. If everyone's going to be their own shaman, it's also their own responsibility to know your drugs, know what your particular body can tolerate, as well as what's generally tolerable, or what's toxic, what has undesirable side effects, and be discriminating, use discernment, be impeccable about it, really, and take responsibility. As part of the whole medical thing, we don't take responsibility for our own health and well-being and getting better. We say, we still have that old the doctor knows best, and And finally, I would say, along with Terence, what Terence was saying is, I think the use of the word drug is not a good word to use, period. I try to use it less and less and less. And even Hoffman said this years ago in relationship to psychedelics. But if you're talking about plants, visionary plants, sacred plants that have a long, long cultural history, as well as nutritional plants, it ties into the use of herbs rather than synthetic antibiotics or drugs in medicine. Herbal medicine is a huge underground medical system that's basically unrecognized and unacknowledged, just the way psychoactive plants and substances are recognized and unacknowledged. So by focusing on herbs and plants, natural substances, using synthetics only in those cases where something has been discovered that's not known otherwise in the plant or animal kingdom, would enable one to bypass much of that whole drug prohibition, paranoia, punitive complex that we live under in this society, which is very, very weird, because you have a fascist minority wishing to not only control certain substances, but actually control what you put into your body. That's going pretty far when you think about it. I mean, it's not that different from them telling you what you can eat and what you can't eat.
Eventually, you see, when we move beyond the current sort of dark age that we're living in, the idea that governments can tell you what drugs you can take will be as bizarre a notion as that governments can buy and sell human beings, or that there should be recognized a divine right of kings. It's actually a civil rights issue. And, in the 19th century, people's argument against women's suffrage was that it would be unimaginable, that the world would be destroyed if you gave women the vote, that just madness would ensue. This is now the argument against allowing people to make these decisions about their bodies and their spiritual development. And yet science, which just relentlessly rolls forward, creating an endless cornucopia of steroids, hallucinogens, aphrodisiacs, memory enhancers, so forth and so on, is presenting us over and over again with this dilemma of how do we chemically manage ourselves in the kind of world we're living in. And I tried to indicate this morning, I think this is central to understanding what human beings are, that there is no such thing as a person without habitual relationships to plants. And it's tea, coffee, sugar, alcohol, and then a wider spectrum.
Cereals.
But yes, cereals. We embed